Hello there. I'm so glad you found your way here. Wherever you are in the world, whether the moon is rising or the last light of day is fading, I invite you to slow down with me. You've arrived at a quiet place where time moves a little more gently, and the past is not something to rush through, but something we drift into, like soft water or sleep. Tonight, we'll be taking a calm and curious journey into a piece of history, one that doesn't ask much of you. No dates to memorize, no facts to chase, just the sounds of another time, the texture of slow rituals, and the quiet lives of people who once moved through the world much as we do, seeking warmth, meaning, and rest. If this kind of storytelling brings you peace, feel free to like or subscribe, but only if it truly feels right to you. And if you'd like to leave a gentle note in the comments, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Something about that always makes the world feel a little smaller and a little kinder. For now, I invite you to make yourself a warm drink, wrap up in something soft, and let your body settle. There's nothing you need to do. Just breathe and let your thoughts begin to wander. The story is waiting, and it begins now. You wake before the sun does, wrapped in the warm folds of reindeer hide. The air in the lavvu is soft with sleep, steeped in the scent of birch smoke and old leather. Outside, the snow rests undisturbed, thick and soundless, like a white breath held across the land. For a long moment, you lie still, your hands tucked against your chest, listening to the rhythm of another breath nearby. Your cousin Marit, curled in her own cocoon of hide, dreams quietly. The fire in the center of the tent is dyed to a bed of ash, but its memory clings to the canvas walls in the form of warmth. You stretch one foot toward the stones and find them cool, but not cruel. The night was kind, and that is all you ask of winter. You rise with slow care, brushing past the dangling bones and antler hooks that hang near the roof poles. They click gently as you pass. The flap of the lavvu opens with a muffled rustle, and the sky greets you with a low blue hush, nearly white at the edges. There's no wind yet, only a soft, motionless chill that enters your lungs like a prayer made of ice. Outside, the reindeer have gathered near the tree line, their antlers pale against the black bark of birch trees. A light frost rims the tufts of lichen they've unearthed. Some of them stand motionless, heads bowed, while others paw at the snow, searching for what lies beneath. You kneel to touch the surface yourself, the snow giving way beneath your palm like cold flour. Every texture of this place has its own memory, and you carry them all in your hands. Behind you, Marit stirs and steps outside, pulling her gakti snug around her shoulders. Her face is still half asleep, framed by braids tucked into a fur-lined hood. She hands you a bundle wrapped in hide, thin slices of dried meat, a pouch of cloudberries, and a small skin of yesterday's tea. The dried meat is dark and fragrant, carrying the quiet richness of smoked spruce. It is not a meal, not yet, but it is enough for now. Did you hear them last night? She asked softly, nodding toward the herd. Something startled them just before dawn. You shake your head. I slept through it. She studies the line of trees. Maybe it was only foxes. You both know it could have been wolves, but there is no need to name it. The morning is still too gentle for that. Together, you gather what you need for the first chores of the day. The fire must be remade. Snow must be melted. The younger reindeer, thin-legged, wide-eyed, need your attention. The older ones have begun to keep their distance this season. They've grown restless, noses lifted too often toward the northern wind. You return to the lavvu, where Marit has already begun to stack the dry birch. You strike the steel against stone until the tinder breathes into flame, tiny at first, then warm and sure. Smoke begins to curl again inside the tent, trailing upward to find the opening in the roof. It carries the scent of last winter's trees, of bark stripped and stored for times like these. By mid-morning, you are walking the perimeter of the grazing area, your boots pressing down a soft path into the snow. Each step is a quiet contract with the earth. You carry a small sack of dried moss, in case the lichen is buried too deep beneath ice. This year, the rains came late, then froze quickly. Some of the reindeer will struggle. You whisper their names as you pass them. Familiar names spoken like gentle encouragements, like greetings to old friends. One calf with a dark stripe down its nose watches you from behind its mother. You pause, reaching into your pouch, and toss a pinch of moss onto a clear patch of snow. The calf stares, uncertain, then slowly steps forward to sniff at the offering. You wait. Patience is a tool older than knives. When you return to the camp, Marit has hung a pot over the fire. The tea has begun to steam. She gestures for you to sit beside her, and you settle on a rolled hide, the warmth from the stones rising into your spine. She hands you a carved wooden cup, smooth by years of handling. The tea is sharp and earthy, made from mountain herbs gathered during last summer's migration. You sip slowly. The steam moistens your eyelashes. A bird calls in the distance, just one note, like a thread pulled through a still cloth. For a long time, you sit without speaking. Silence is a comfortable thing here, made of familiar weight and shared rhythm. The crackling fire, the gentle shifting of hooves beyond the tent, the creak of the snow as it settles into itself. These are the voices you understand best. Marit reaches for her sewing, the needle glinting in the morning light that filters through the hide. She works on a strip of blue cloth, replacing the worn trim on her gakti with something newer, brighter. The pattern is the same as her mother's. The symbols speak of her place among the Skolt, of rivers and stones and old stories. She doesn't look up as she speaks again. Do you think you'll go north this spring? You shrug. Maybe, if the herd wants to. She nods. I think I'll stay here, at least until the thaw. You glance at her, not because of the words, but because of the way she says them. There is something unfinished in her voice, a question she isn't asking. Instead of answering, you rise to fetch more snow. The pot is boiled down low. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you move toward the cleanest patch near the edge of the clearing. You scoop with both hands, holding the soft weight of it in a birchwood bowl. It gleams like powdered silver in the light. When you return, the fire has shifted. The logs have collapsed into a brighter heart. You feed it carefully, placing each piece with reverence. Fire does not like haste. You both prepare a meal without needing to speak. Reindeer meat, thawed by the side of the fire, goes into the pot with dried berries and slivers of bark for flavor. The scent rises slowly, rich, savory, and grounding. When it's ready, you eat together, dipping carved spoons into the thick broth. You let it warm your throat, your chest, your hands. This kind of meal is not rushed. It is a quiet anchor in the moving hours of the day. By late morning, the sun has begun to glow behind the veil of clouds. It will not rise far. In this season, it hovers low, spreading pale light across the snow. It paints long shadows and gives everything a golden edge, like the inside of a shell. You step outside once more, the air colder now than it was at dawn. The wind has picked up slightly, stirring the fur trim around your hood. You stand near the edge of the camp, watching the reindeer drift among the trees, their backs dusted with snow. There's peace in this distance, in watching them, in knowing they do not need to be commanded. They remember paths older than maps. Mari joins you, her cup of tea steaming between her gloves. She leans her shoulder against yours, just lightly. The contact is brief, but grounding. I dreamed of the river last night, she murmurs. The one near Anna. You nod. You remember that river. You both crossed it last spring, the ice cracking under your sled as the sun softened the edges of the season. There were birds overhead then, wild and laughing. The snow was already melting. That was a good crossing, you say. It was, she replies. It felt like a song. The two of you stand there for a while, listening to nothing. The nothing here is thick with life. Distant antler calls, the occasional rustle of a birch branch against a heavier gust. Beneath it all, the deep quiet that settles between people who do not need to fill the air. When your fingers begin to ache with cold, you turn back toward the tent. The smell of stew still lingers in the air, and the fire crackles softly as if welcoming your return. Inside, you peel off your gloves and lay them near the stones to dry. You settle again onto the hide, folding your legs beneath you. The heat is gentle, wrapping around you like old wool. Marit sits beside you, her sewing placed carefully back into its pouch. She rests her head against the tent pole, eyes half closed. You both exhale slowly, in unison. There is nothing urgent now. No chase, no task unfinished. The morning has unfolded in its own rhythm, like a song with no refrain. You lean back, letting your breath match the crackle of the fire. Outside, the snow continues to fall, soft, unhurried, and steady as memory. By midday, the sky remains low and lightless, but there is a softness to its silence. The sun does not climb high in this season. It simply drifts, like a lantern behind gauze, scattering pale gold along the horizon. Its presence is not about brightness, but about rhythm. You can feel it in the way the trees cast long, slender shadows, and in the way the snow glows faintly beneath your boots. You stretch your legs before the fire, letting the warmth ease into your knees. Beside you, Mari hums quietly, an old tune you remember from when you were children. A joik, not of a person or place, but of a mood. Her voice doesn't fill the space. It drifts through it, like smoke through cold air. The melody holds no words, only shapes. You recognize them as a kind of memory. You close your eyes for a moment and let the tune carry you to stillness. When you rise again, it is not because of urgency. It is simply the right moment. You gather your satchel, check the stitching along your boots, and wrap your woolen scarf across your chest. The time has come to walk toward the western slope, where the younger reindeer tend to wander. Some drift too far, following instinct or scent. It is your task to follow them back into the safety of the grazing ground. Marit gives you a quiet glance as you step outside. She doesn't ask if you will return before dusk. She knows you will. The air beyond the lavu is colder now, but still gentle in its weight. There is no wind, only a faint rustling among the trees. The sky above has taken on a pewter color, and the snow beneath reflects its muted glow. The world feels quiet and enormous, and yet you know each slope and hollow like the lines of your palm. You walk with measured steps, your boots sinking softly into the drifts. The reindeer have left faint tracks, interwoven arcs that disappear into the birches. Their hooves press into the crusted snow, revealing patches of lichen and moss that cling to the rocks below. You follow the tracks in silence, letting the stillness settle into your chest. As you walk, the forest opens in patches. Sparse birch trees with pale, peeling bark stand like old sentinels. Some lean toward the light, others twist away from it. Their branches are bare, save for the thin frost that coats them like sugar. Your gloves brush against one as you pass, knocking loose a sprinkle of ice that falls with a faint whisper. There's a sense of familiarity in this walk. You have taken it many times before, yet today it feels different. Not because of the path, but because of the pace. You are not rushing. You are not searching. You are simply moving, tracing the edge of something invisible. Far ahead, you catch sight of two reindeer standing by a frozen stream. Their breath curls into the air. One raises its head and watches you approach. You lower your eyes and slow your steps. They are not afraid, but they do not like surprise. You speak their names softly, just above a whisper. Names passed down from your father's herd, and from his mother's before that. The older one, a female with a notched ear and pale flank, turns and steps away. The younger follows, still unsure in its movements. You do not chase them. You walk beside them, giving space, letting them feel your presence rather than forcing it. As they turn back toward the grazing ground, You pause by the edge of the stream. The surface is frozen in delicate patterns, white threads laced over translucent blue. You crouch down and run your fingers along the ice. Beneath it, you imagine water still moving, silent, patient, waiting for the thaw. Nearby, a pine tree creaks under the weight of snow. Its voice is low and wooden, like the floorboards of an old house. You lean against it and let yourself breathe. Your scarf carries the scent of smoke and wool. Your mittens are damp from touching ice, but your body is warm. You have learned how to carry warmth with you, like a flame cupped in your hands. For a while, you do not move. You watch the reindeer drift slowly between trees, stopping now and then to nudge snow aside. This, too, is work. It is the kind of work that leaves no tools behind, only tracks and softened snow. You feel a kind of kinship with them, not as their master, not even as their guide, but as someone who shares the same sky and the same rhythm. Eventually, the sky begins to shift, not darker, but deeper. The pale light becomes silver, then soft bronze. You begin your return, following your own footprints back through the trees. Snow has already begun to fall into them, smoothing the edges. By evening, they may be gone entirely. At the edge of camp, the scent of stew welcomes you. Someone has added pine bark to the pot, a trick for flavor in lean times. You remove your gloves and brush snow from your shoulders. Inside the lavabo, Marit has set out the bowls. She smiles without speaking. You nod in return and lower yourself to the hide beside the fire. The stew is thick and warm, with bits of carrot and preserved mushroom from last summer's storehouse. The broth clings to the spoon, rich with the taste of time. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. Outside, the reindeer are still moving, faint shapes in the trees, but they are close enough now to be safe. After the meal, you rest your back against a wooden chest near the wall. Its lid is carved with old patterns, spirals and sunbursts, worn smooth by generations of touch. You run your fingers along them, tracing the curve of each line. They are stories told without words. Marit pours the last of the tea into your cup. It is bitter now, oversteeped, but still comforting. She refills her own and settles across from you, her eyes following the firelight. "Do you remember the old woman from Jiksenji?" she asks quietly. You nod. She used to make dolls from antler and moss. She said she could see the weather and the way a reindeer blinked. She also said butter was a sign of laziness. Marit laughs softly, like snow falling on dry grass. You laugh with her, and for a moment, the tent feels warmer. The fire crackles and shifts, sending sparks upward. Shadows dance along the canvas walls. There's no urgency now, no list of tasks, no bell to summon you forward. Only the slow passing of hours, measured by light, by scent, by the way the snow moves outside the flap. You place your empty cup beside the fire and stretch your legs. The heat seeps into your bones, lulling your thoughts into softness. You close your eyes and listen, not for danger, not for instruction, but for presence. Marit hums again, a different tune this time. A song of the hills in spring, when the snow begins to loosen its grip. You can see it in your mind. Streams cutting paths through old drifts. Birds calling from the tops of thawed trees. Reindeer calves testing their legs. You do not need to be there to feel it. The memory is enough. For now, the snow is deep. The trees are still. And the day is not yet done. You shift your body and lie back on a folded hide, folding your arms across your chest. The fire crackles steadily beside you. The ceiling of the tent darkens, slightly as the sky outside deepens in tone. Your eyes flutter closed. You are not sleeping, not quite, but you are resting, letting the day settle into you like snow into branches. Slow, unhurried, and quiet. Somewhere outside, a reindeer bell jingles faintly. Somewhere beyond that, the wind begins to stir. And in the heart of it all, you breathe. The day is tilting now, not ending, but leaning gently towards stillness. like a breath drawing in before night. The light outside the lavu has grown dim and golden, slipping between the trees in thin streaks. The snow has softened, and at its quiet surface, you can see hints of amber reflected from the low sky. Everything glows, but nothing hurries. You stir slowly, eyes blinking open to the soft rhythm of Marit moving across the tent. She doesn't speak. She simply lifts the flap and steps outside, her silhouette outlined for a moment against the fading sky. A trace of steam follows her, like the ghost of the fire's warmth reaching out into the cold. You sit up, stretching gently. The floor beneath you is thick with layered hides, warm in places where the fire has touched them, and cool where the edges meet the snow-packed ground. Your limbs feel heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the gentle gravity of rest. Your body, like the earth outside, is winding itself down. Outside, the sound of the reindeer has returned. Small snorts, the shuffle of hooves, the light clatter of antlers brushing branches. They have wandered close again, perhaps drawn by the familiarity of voices and fire, or perhaps by instinct. The herd knows its rhythm. It knows where to return, even when nothing calls it. You pull on your mittens and step into your boots. The wool lining welcomes your feet, still warm from earlier. The cold air outside bites gently at your cheeks, sharp and clean. It feels like the edge of a river stone, smooth, worn, and strong. Marit stands a short distance away, her arms folded across her chest, eyes tilted toward the sky. You join her without speaking. Overhead, the clouds have thinned, and in the opening between them, stars are beginning to blink awake. The first ones come slowly, like old friends arriving early to a gathering, pale, watchful, and patient. She turns to you and smiles. Her nose is red with cold, but her eyes are peaceful. The weather will hold, she says. Maybe one more quiet night. You nod, eyes drifting back to the sky. Do you think the herd will sleep near the tree line? Most of them, yes, but we should check before dark. Together, you begin the slow walk across the clearing, toward the grove where the reindeer gather to bed down. The snow here is more packed from their hooves, and scattered with tufts of moss and bark. A light wind moves through the upper branches, shaking loose a gentle shower of powder that drifts like ash. You feel it land on your hood, your eyelashes, your shoulders. It melts quickly, leaving tiny beads of moisture behind. The reindeer greet you with soft eyes and steady breath. They do not scatter. They have seen you before, in this light, in this hour. You move among them like another tree, familiar and harmless. One old bull lowers his head as you pass, his breath rising in long trails toward the deepening dusk. Marit pauses beside a younger doe, one who has been limping these last few days. She crouches slowly, reaching into the small leather pouch at her side, and pulls out a handful of dried lichen. The doe sniffs, hesitates, then steps closer to eat from her palm. The two of them remain there for a while, girl and animal, bound by quiet trust. There's no need for words. You continue past them, circling the edge of the grove, counting shadows. A few of the reindeer have wandered farther, just beyond the visible trees. You whistle low, 3 short notes, always the same, and wait. Moments later, 2 of them return, their hooves silent against the snow. You step aside and let them pass. When you return to Marit, she has settled against a tree trunk, watching the sky grow darker through the branches. The stars have thickened now, and the faintest trace of northern light brushes the horizon, green, pale, and uncertain, like the beginning of a dream. I remember when we were children, she says quietly, how we used to think the lights were spirits, dancing for us. You nod. I still think they are. She smiles again, not the kind of smile that breaks across the face like a wave, but the kind that rises slowly, like dawn in the dead of winter. A smile that means yes, maybe. The wind rises for a moment, curling around your boots and under your coat. You both lift your hoods and turn toward the lavo, your body's leaning slightly into the wind's gentle resistance. The smoke from the fire has found its rhythm again, thin lines lifting upward, twisting as they rise. Back at camp, you check the sleds, wooden frames lashed with hide and packed with supplies. The ropes are tight, the runners are smooth. If the snow stays dry, they'll move easily tomorrow. You kneel beside one and brush away the thin layer of frost that has begun to gather along the edge. Mari gathers more wood from the stack and feeds the fire slowly, choosing each piece with care. Birch burns clean. You can hear the difference in the way it catches flame, the way it snaps when the sap begins to boil. You sit beside her again, and for a while you both simply watch. The fire throws shadows across the tent wall, dancing shapes that look like stories told in movement. Outside, the reindeer shift and settle. One calls out, a low sound, deep in the chest. Another responds from somewhere farther off. You eat a simple evening meal, more stew, thick with root vegetables and bits of dried fish, softened over the fire. The flavor is earthbound and steady. You chew slowly, letting it fill you with warmth. Your breath fogs in the cold, mixing with the scent of the broth and the faint tang of smoke. Afterwards, you take out the small carving knife your grandfather once gave you, and a length of antler you've been shaping into a handle. The blade is short and curved, sharp enough to split thread. You begin to carve, the motion slow and practiced. Each notch, each curve, is a step toward something remembered. Marit works beside you, threading beads into a strip of leather. Her fingers are steady. The beads click gently as they slide into place. Blue and red, bone white and yellow. Patterns passed down through memory, not paper. She hums again, this time a lullaby. You glance at her, and for a moment, your thoughts drift not to the past, but to the future. You wonder if these quiet hours, these unspoken understandings, will stretch on forever. If the snow will always fall in this way. If the stars will always arrive gently, one by one. There's no answer to that. Only the fire, only the snow, only the quiet unfolding dark. You finish your carving and set it aside to cool. The antler has taken the shape you imagined. A smooth curve, a simple ridge, a small spiral at the end. It will fit well in your hand. It will be useful. Marit leans back, her beadwork resting across her knees. We should bring in the water skins, she says, before they freeze solid. You nod and rise again, your movement slower now. Your body is winding down, like the day. You step outside once more, gathering the skins from the shaded side of the sled. The cold bites deeper now. The stars overhead are sharp. The northern light has returned, brighter this time, flowing in long ribbons that shift and flicker like silk. You pause, water skins in hand, and look up. The lights move without sound, without purpose. Just motion, just beauty, as if the sky has remembered something it wanted to say. You breathe in deeply, letting the cold settle inside your chest. Then you turn back to the lavu. Inside, the fire welcomes you again. Its warmth wraps around your shoulders like a familiar shawl. Marit has laid out your bedroll, folded the hides neatly. The light is low now, just enough to see the curve of the tent, the glint of a needle, the hollow of a bowl. You hang the water skins near the fire and remove your boots. The floor beneath your feet is cool but soft. You slip into your sleeping layer slowly, letting each fold settle around you like a second skin. Marit finishes tying off her beadwork and places it beside her pack. She lowers herself onto her bedroll, stretching with a small sigh. For a long time, neither of you speaks. Then, softly, she says, "I think the dough will be all right." You nod, though she cannot see it in the dark. She's strong. She reminds me of your sister. You smile, remembering. She was always chasing things bigger than herself. Marit chuckles quietly, and never backing down. The fire pops gently. The smoke rises. The cold presses against the tent from outside, but inside, is warm. You close your eyes, letting the last light fade behind your lids. The night has not yet fully arrived, but it is near. The stars are waiting. The snow is still falling, and tomorrow will come, just as slowly, just as gently. The day is tilting now, not ending, but leaning gently toward stillness, like a breath drawing in before night. The light outside the lavu has grown dim and golden, slipping between the trees in thin streaks. The snow has softened, and in its quiet surface, you can see hints of amber reflected from the low sky. Everything glows, but nothing hurries. You stir slowly, eyes blinking open to the soft rhythm of Marit moving across the tent. She doesn't speak. She simply lifts the flap and steps outside, her silhouette outlined for a moment against the fading sky. A trace of steam follows her, like the ghost of the fire's warmth reaching out into the cold. You sit up, stretching gently. The floor beneath you is thick with layered hides, warm in places where the fire has touched them, and cool where the edges meet the snow-packed ground. Your limbs feel heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the gentle gravity of rest. Your body, like the earth outside, is winding itself down. Outside, the sound of the reindeer has returned. Small snorts, the shuffle of hooves, the light clatter of antlers brushing branches. They have wandered close again, perhaps drawn by the familiarity of voices and fire, or perhaps by instinct. The herd knows its rhythm. It knows where to return, even when nothing calls it. You pull on your mittens and step into your boots. The wool lining welcomes your feet, still warm from earlier. The cold air outside bites gently at your cheeks, sharp and clean. It feels like the edge of a river stone, smooth, worn, and strong. Marit stands a short distance away, her arms folded across her chest, eyes tilted toward the sky. You join her without speaking. Overhead, the clouds have thinned, and in the opening between them, stars are beginning to blink awake. The first ones come slowly, like old friends arriving early to a gathering, pale, watchful, and patient. She turns to you and smiles. Her nose is red with cold, but her eyes are peaceful. The weather will hold, she says. Maybe one more quiet night. You nod, eyes drifting back to the sky. Do you think the herd will sleep near the tree line? Most of them, yes, but we should check before dark. Together, you begin the slow walk across the clearing, toward the grove where the reindeer gather to bed down. The snow here is more packed from their hooves, and scattered with tufts of moss and bark. A light wind moves through the upper branches, shaking loose a gentle shower of powder that drifts like ash. You feel it land on your hood, your eyelashes, your shoulders. It melts quickly, leaving tiny beads of moisture behind. The reindeer greet you with soft eyes and steady breath. They do not scatter. They have seen you before, in this light, in this hour. You move among them like another tree, familiar and harmless. One old bull lowers his head as you pass, his breath rising in long trails toward the deepening dusk. Marit pauses beside a younger doe, one who has been limping these last few days. She crouches slowly, reaching into the small leather pouch at her side, and pulls out a handful of dried lichen. The doe sniffs, hesitates, then steps closer to eat from her palm. The two of them remain there for a while, girl and animal, bound by quiet trust. There is no need for words. You continue past them, circling the edge of the grove, counting shadows. A few of the reindeer have wandered farther, just beyond the visible trees. You whistle low, 3 short notes, always the same, and wait. Moments later, 2 of them return, their hooves silent against the snow. You step aside and let them pass. When you return to Marit, she is settled against a tree trunk, watching the sky grow darker through the branches. The stars have thickened now, and the faintest trace of northern light brushes the horizon, green, pale, and uncertain, like the beginning of a dream. I remember when we were children, she says quietly, how we used to think the lights were spirits, dancing for us. You nod. I still think they are. She smiles again. Not the kind of smile that breaks across the face like a wave, but the kind that rises slowly, like dawn in the dead of winter. A smile that means yes, maybe. The wind rises for a moment, curling around your boots and under your coat. You both lift your hoods and turn toward the lava, your bodies leaning slightly into the wind's gentle resistance. The smoke from the fire has found its rhythm again, thin lines lifting upward, twisting as they rise. Back at camp, you check the sleds, wooden frames lashed with hide and packed with supplies. The ropes are tight. The runners are smooth. If the snow stays dry, they'll move easily tomorrow. You kneel beside one and brush away the thin layer of frost that has begun to gather along the edge. Mari gathers more wood from the stack and feeds the fire slowly, choosing each piece with care. Birch burns clean. You can hear the difference in the way it catches flame, the way it snaps when the sap begins to boil. You sit beside her again, and for a while you both simply watch. The fire throws shadows across the tent wall, dancing shapes that look like stories told in movement. Outside, the reindeer shift and settle. One calls out, a low sound deep in the chest. Another responds from somewhere farther off. You eat a simple evening meal, more stew, thick with root vegetables and bits of dried fish, softened over the fire. The flavor is earthbound and steady. You chew slowly, letting it fill you with warmth. Your breath fogs in the cold, mixing with the scent of the broth and the faint tang of smoke. Afterwards, you take out the small carving knife your grandfather once gave you, and a length of antler you've been shaping into a handle. The blade is short and curved, sharp enough to split thread. You begin to carve, the motion slow and practiced. Each notch, each curve, is a step toward something remembered. Marit works beside you, threading beads into a strip of leather. Her fingers are steady. The beads click gently as they slide into place. Blue and red, bone white and yellow. Patterns passed down through memory, not paper. She hums again, this time a lullaby. You glance at her, and for a moment, your thoughts drift not to the past, but to the future. You wonder if these quiet hours, these unspoken understandings, will stretch on forever. If the snow will always fall in this way. If the stars will always arrive gently, one by one. There's no answer to that. Only the fire. Only the snow. Only the quiet, unfolding dark. You finish your carving and set it aside to cool. The antler has taken the shape you imagined. A smooth curve, a simple ridge, a small spiral at the end. It will fit well in your hand. It will be useful. Marit leans back, her beadwork resting across her knees. We should bring in the water skins, she says, before they freeze solid. You nod and rise again, your movement slower now. Your body is winding down, like the day. You step outside once more, gathering the skins from the shaded side of the sled. The cold bites deeper now. The stars overhead are sharp. The northern light has returned, brighter this time, flowing in long ribbons that shift and flicker like silk. You pause, water skins in hand, and look up. The lights move without sound, without purpose. Just motion, just beauty, as if the sky has remembered something it wanted to say. You breathe in deeply, letting the cold settle inside your chest. Then you turn back to the lavu. Inside, the fire welcomes you again. Its warmth wraps around your shoulders like a familiar shawl. Marit has laid out your bedroll, folded the hides neatly. The light is low now, just enough to see the curve of the tent, the glint of a needle, the hollow of a bowl. You hang the water skins near the fire and remove your boots. The floor beneath your feet is cool but soft. You slip into your sleeping layer slowly, letting each fold settle around you like a second skin. Marit finishes tying off her beadwork and places it beside her pack. She lowers herself onto her bedroll, stretching with a small sigh. For a long time, neither of you speaks. Then, softly, she says, "I think the dough will be all right." You nod. though she cannot see it in the dark. She's strong. She reminds me of your sister. You smile, remembering. She was always chasing things bigger than herself. Marit chuckles quietly, and never backing down. The fire pops gently. The smoke rises. The cold presses against the tent from outside, but inside is warm. You close your eyes, letting the last light fade behind your lids. The night has not yet fully arrived, but it is near. The stars are waiting. The snow is still falling, and tomorrow will come, just as slowly, just as gently. Evening settles over the forest like a wool blanket drawn across the sky. The last colors of the day have faded, leaving behind soft gradients of silver and ash. Darkness here is never harsh. It arrives with grace, carried on the breath of snow, shaped by the hush of distant trees. You feel it long before you see it. The fire inside the lava has burned low again, casting a warm circle that flickers gently across the floor. Around it, shadows sway and soften, shifting with the movements of your breath and the slow curl of smoke. Marit has already wrapped herself in her sleeping furs. She lies still, facing the inner wall, her back rising and falling in rhythm with the silence. You remain seated near the fire, cross-legged beneath your blanket, eyes half closed. The day lingers in your body, a gentle ache in your thighs, a pleasant heaviness in your shoulders. There is no need for thought, only sensation. You sip the last of the boiled tea, now cooled to a soft bitterness, and let the taste settle on your tongue. Bitter, herbal, and faintly sweet, like memory pulled from a long-forgotten root. Outside, the reindeer have stilled. Their bells ring less often now. Quiet chimes carried by wind and habit. You picture them lying beneath the trees, legs folded, bodies nestled into hollows of snow. Steam rises from their backs into the night. Each one holds its own warmth, just as you do. A circle of breath, rhythm of waiting. You rise gently and step outside, drawing your coat close. The snow beneath your feet is firmer now, crusted slightly by the falling chill. The stars above are brighter than before, closer, it seems, than any roof or tree. They spill across the sky in slow constellations, trailing through the dark like beads across a woven sash. To the north, the aurora pulses. It is brighter now, unfurling in wide bands of green and blue, flickering with occasional threads of pale violet. You tilt your head and watch. The lights do not dance in any human way. They ripple like cloth caught in invisible tides, drifting across the firmament without beginning or end. You step farther into the open snow, away from the tent. Each movement feels ceremonial, not for any audience, but for the land itself. You pause and listen, not for animals, not for wind, but for the silence that contains them both. Here, beneath the northern sky, time moves differently. It stretches, not in length, but in depth. A single moment may hold the whole of your breath, and the breath of those who came before you. You close your eyes and let it all in. In this moment, you think of your grandmother. She would have stood here once, in this very clearing, perhaps not in this exact snow, but close enough for the trees to remember her. She would have looked at the same sky, seen the same stars, heard the same wind. Her hands were once your age, her steps once as light. She, too, would have stopped in this hour between light and darkness and wondered what came next. You lower your eyes to the snow. Your footprints have begun to fade behind you. The wind is filling them in. You feel no sadness in this, only reverence. You turn back toward the lava. Inside, the warmth welcomes you again. The fire has burned down to glowing embers. Marit stirs slightly in her sleep, pulling her blanket closer. You move slowly, not to disturb her. You place another small log on the coals, just enough to keep the warmth steady until morning. The wood crackles softly, its scent mixing with the old comfort of smoke and leather. You settle into your bedroll, shifting your body until it finds its natural curve. The hide beneath you is cool at first, then warming. Your mittens rest beside your head, your knife tucked safely near your boots. Everything is where it should be. Marit speaks, her voice quiet and close. With the light still out, you smile into the darkness, brighter than before. They were stretching across the whole sky. She exhales slowly. Then tomorrow will be calm. You nod, even though she cannot see it. Yes, I think it will be. She does not speak again. Her breath deepens. The hush of rest returns. You lie awake for a while, staring at the dark ceiling of the tent. Shadows flicker faintly, tracing old shapes along the canvas. You know some of them by heart. The curve of an antler, the outline of a fishing net, the spiral of a sun. These are not just decorations. They are guides, markers of where you've been and where others have gone before you. In the stillness, your thoughts begin to slow. They take on the pace of the fire, the pace of snow, the pace of sleep. You think of the calf that followed you this morning, of the doe with the healing leg, of the elder bull who dipped his head in quiet greeting. You think of Marit's voice, humming old joiks while threading beads. You think of the way steam rose from the stew, the way pine smoke clung to your scarf, the way the birch tree creaked beneath the stars. And you think of how none of it felt hurried, how all of it belonged to something wider than you. A season, a story, a circle of days that folds in upon itself, slow and sure. You pull the blanket higher over your chest. Your eyes begin to close. Beyond the walls of the tent, the lights still move across the sky. The reindeer rest in the trees. The snow continues to fall slowly, soundlessly, in perfect accord with the night. You do not resist sleep when it comes. You welcome it like a friend returning from a long journey. No words are needed. Only breath, only warmth, only quiet. And as your body sinks into rest, the world outside remains, watchful, wild, and gentle, waiting for morning. In a valley tucked between winter-thick hills, a narrow stream winds its way beneath a thin crust of ice. The land here is pale with snow, but not lifeless. Birch trees stand in patient rows, their trunks marked by wind and age. Reindeer tracks cross the slope near the riverbank, curving between rocks and under low-hanging branches. Above, a faint breeze carries the scent of smoke and frozen lichen. In a small wooden house just beyond the stream, a single window glows with lamplight. The glass has been thumb-smeared clear in one corner, where someone has pressed a hand to see beyond the frost. Inside, the air is still quiet, warmed by a low fire and the faint scent of ink and wool. Elsa Laula Renberg sits beside the window with a folded blanket across her knees. Her fingers are stained faintly with ink, her sleeves rolled up above her wrists. She holds a thin piece of paper between her hands, not reading, not writing, but simply resting with it, eyes lowered, breath steady. Outside, snow taps against the edge of the windowsill. It gathers along the roof, muting the sound of the world beyond. It is 1904, and the valley is quieter than usual. Elsa's home is near the borderland where Norway and Sweden meet, though such lines mean little to the herders whose families have moved across them for generations. For her, these borders are more than political. They are personal. They are the edge between silence and voice, between being seen and being dismissed, between belonging and erasure. She places the paper down and smooths it with her palm. The words she has written are sharp but measured, direct but not cruel. It is a draft of her pamphlet, a small booklet that will soon be passed from hand to hand across the snowy north. 30 pages of careful truth, a voice for the Sami people, in her own language and in her own terms. The ink has barely dried, but the thoughts behind it are older than she can trace. She thinks of her father's hands, calloused from sled work, folding dry moss into bundles to feed the herd during late frost years. She remembers her mother's voice, clear and calm, even during long court proceedings in the Swedish courts, where the right to keep their land was balanced on foreign tongues. She remembers the cold hallway, where she first read the decree granting her mother's claim, an official document that recognized a small piece of land as theirs, and theirs alone. It had felt, at the time, like a stone placed carefully at the edge of a stream. Not a dam, not a wall, but something steady, something that would not be carried away. Now, she writes not only for her family, but for many reindeer herders who have been pushed off ancestral lands, children forbidden to speak Sami in new state-run schools, women who carry traditions in song and stitch but are told their voices are not useful in matters of law. She is 27 years old, a midwife by training, a political organizer by necessity, a quiet woman in a quiet house, writing a message that does not raise its voice, but does not step back. In the next room, a kettle hums gently over the fire. Steam curls upward, catching the orange light. Elsa rises, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her steps are slow but sure across the wooden floor. She pours a cup and holds it between her palms, breathing in the herbal scent. Outside, the snow deepens. A horse pulls a sled along the ridge road, the bells muffled by distance and snow. The driver calls to the horse gently, and the sled disappears behind the trees. Elsa returns to her desk. The ink is dried now. She stacks the pages together, aligning the corners. The words stare up at her. They are not elegant, not poetic, but they are clear. She reads one line again. We do not ask to be pitied, only to be heard. She feels a quiet steadiness as she reads it aloud, just once, to the fire. Not as a plea, but as a promise. In the years to come, these pages will travel across borders, across parlors, across gathering halls in Trondheim and Jokkmokk. They will land in the hands of scholars, teachers, ministers, and fellow Sami. Some will nod, some will ignore, but the words will keep moving. Elsa will keep moving too. She will speak before assemblies, organize women's groups, write letters to monarchs. She will chair the first Pan-Nordic Sami Assembly in 1917, her voice echoing through the wood-paneled halls of Trondheim, quiet but unwavering. She will bring together Sami of many dialects and many places, north and south, inland and coastal, herding and fishing. She will open that gathering not with anger, but with resolve, and she will do it all with the same stillness she holds now, seated in a modest chair beside a window, listening to the winter settle outside. In the village, others move about their evening. Lamps are lit. Children are hushed. Porridge is stirred. Stories are passed across steaming bowls. Few know that Elsa writes just across the hill. Few know what she is planning, but the shape of her life is already beginning to turn outward, toward the people, toward the law, toward the future. She finishes her tea and returns to her work, checking the folds of the pages. In a small box beneath her desk, she places the pamphlet gently beside others, letters, notes, family petitions, a record of her thoughts, a map made of ink. Later, when her husband Tomas returns from checking the barn, she will warm his gloves by the fire and ask after the horses. They will sit together in comfortable silence. She will not speak of the pamphlet tonight. There is time. The changes she hopes for are not rushed. They are carried slowly, like fire from camp to camp, like stories between generations, like joiks that hold a place long after the people have moved. Elsa leans back in her chair and listens. The wind moves softly against the wall of the house. Somewhere in the forest, a reindeer bell rings once, then is gone. She breathes in, steady, focused. There's work ahead. Not loud work, not showy work, but real, enduring work. Work that begins not in protest, but in care. And tonight, under the stars of Sápmi, a small flame has been lit. In the gentle sweep of the inland north, where spruce forests meet open marsh, the seasons do not rush. They settle, they circle, they listen before they speak. And in the villages that line the rivers, slow-moving and dark beneath their frozen skins, the people move with similar patience. It is into this rhythm that Elsa Laula Renberg returned after years of study, not as a student this time, but as a midwife. And not only as a midwife, but as a listener, a speaker, and slowly, a weaver of something broader than healing, a quiet kind of gathering. Her return was marked by no ceremony. There was no crowd waiting by the edge of the village, no speech, no ribbon cutting. There was only the familiarity of winter breath, the sound of horse hooves pressing into packed snow, and the steady eyes of people who had known her family for generations. They did not ask where she had been. They knew, and they did not ask what she had brought home. They would see soon enough. In the first weeks, her work was the work of care. Ailing elders, difficult births, late-night calls from households where something was not quite right. She brought herbs, cloth, water. She listened to breathing. She carried knowledge in her hands, not in the shape of credentials, but in the ease of touch and presence. The people noticed, not quickly and not all at once, but in small ways. A quiet nod from a mother who had once doubted her. A seat offered beside the fire in a home where she had once been only a girl. These gestures, though small, held more weight than any public appointment. But Elsa's care extended beyond rooms and thresholds. She walked between cabins in the blue hours of afternoon, when the sun drifted low and the snow caught its gold. She sat by the fire with women whose sons had been sent to boarding schools, whose daughters returned with the Sami language pressed flat beneath new syllables. They told her of schoolmasters who insisted the old tongue was wrong, of officials who marked down names with the ends clipped off, made shorter, simpler, more useful. They told her of land shifted by border lines drawn in far-off cities, of permits denied, of traditions that had become paperwork. Elsa did not answer with comfort. She answered with attention, and then with writing. She began to gather these stories. She wrote them carefully, in plain script, with the kind of detail that leaves little space for denial. She did not embellish. She did not accuse. But her pages built something that could not be easily set aside. She reached out to others, beyond the valley, across rivers and snowy plains. She wrote to Sami families in other districts, to fishermen along the coast, to herders in the highlands. She asked them questions, but more importantly, she listened to their answers. Over time, she became a thread between distant homes, threading experiences together, tying one voice gently to the next. Her home, once quiet, began to fill with paper. Letters tucked into coat pockets, notes passed across sleds, whole sheets folded into pouches and delivered by neighbors returning from the market. She read each one slowly, by lamplight. She read of broken sled paths and grazing permits lost in translation, of young men conscripted without warning, of girls punished for weaving in traditional patterns, of small herds taxed like farms, of large farms taking lands where herds had passed for centuries. Still, she did not speak of rebellion. She spoke of rights, of dignity, of coexistence, and she began to shape these thoughts into form. The Burskenken Sami Association was one of her first efforts in Norway, a group formed not with banners and speeches, but with discussion, around tables, on sled rides, by letter. Slowly it took root. It was not a large organization. It did not own property or seek headlines, but it held space for conversation, for shared experience, for planning. And it held something else, too, something unusual at the time. It welcomed women. Elsa understood that tradition could carry weight, but she also understood that silence could not be mistaken for consent. The women who spun wool, tended fires, shaped patterns, sang lullabies, delivered children. These were the same women who could speak clearly of what was changing and what should remain. She invited them in. She listened. In quiet rooms, by the heat of wood stoves, the conversations grew. They spoke of Sami boarding schools, where discipline replaced storytelling, of how churches encouraged forgetting, and how forgetting became a kind of loneliness. They spoke of maps that showed only borders, not reindeer trails, of snowplows that ignored ancestral paths. Some of it was spoken plainly. Some of it was shared with long pauses and downward glances. But Elsa heard all of it, and slowly, she carried it forward. She began to write again, this time not as a private gathering of thoughts, but as a message for those in power. The pamphlet she had once drafted became a published work in For Liv Felidod, Sanning Sword I de Lapska for Hollandina. In English, it would read, Life or Death, words of truth about the conditions of the lapse. It was not an emotional plea. It was a documentation, a call for visibility, a mirror held up to a system that preferred blurred images. The reaction was mixed. Some praised her clarity. Others dismissed her. A few grew uncomfortable. One local official reportedly said, "It is not her place to explain us to ourselves." Elsa found quiet irony in that. She had never claimed to explain others. She had only offered her own eyes. But what mattered most was not the praise or the disapproval. What mattered was that people read it, and that people began to respond. By the winter of 1917, something had shifted. There was a sense, quiet, unspoken, that the Sami voice was beginning to echo. Not loudly, not with banners or violence, but with certainty. Elsa, now married to Thomas Peterson Tuvin and living in northern Norway, prepared for what would become the first pan-Nordic Sami assembly in Trondheim. She did not view it as a revolution. She viewed it as a gathering, a listening, a beginning. Her work was not finished. Her questions were not answered, but her steps were steady. And as she walked once again through the snow-packed streets of small northern village, her feet found familiar ground. She knew the path, not because it had been marked before, but because she was choosing to walk it now. Trondheim in winter is a city of muted streets and sloping rooftops, where frost gathers on window ledges and horse-drawn sleighs pass with the quiet rhythm of habit. On some days, the cathedral bells ring out into the snow, steady and slow, marking the hour not just for the townspeople, but for the visitors arriving from the far edges of the north. In February of 1917, one such group began to gather. They came not in masses, but in thoughtful numbers, by sled, by train, by foot, drawn from across Sapmi, that wide and borderless homeland spanning the north of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. These were reindeer herders and fishermen, teachers, weavers, elders, mothers, a few officials. They brought with them their dialects, their traditions, and their questions, and they were greeted at the doors of the Methodist Free Church in Trondheim by a quiet woman with a thoughtful gaze and steady shoulders. Elsa Laula Renberg. It had taken years of conversation, coordination, and conviction to bring this gathering into being. Letters had crossed long distances, some hand-delivered by sled across snow. Meetings had been held in kitchens and community halls. And now, finally, the Sami assembly stood ready to begin. The church itself was not grand, but it held warmth. Wooden floors, high windows, lamplights softened by frost. A central room large enough for chairs to circle without crowding. The voices of those arriving were hushed at first, cautious, then warmer, as familiar faces met across tables and unfamiliar names were introduced with nods and glances. Elsa did not open with a speech of fire or a declaration. She welcomed the delegates as one might welcome family to a winter feast, with quiet formality, with patience, with the understanding that what they were about to begin did not need urgency to matter. It only needed to begin. She spoke clearly, without ornament, not just in Norwegian, but also in her native Sami. And in doing so, she reminded the room that this was not a borrowed space. It was theirs. The issues on the agenda were not abstract. They were deeply practical. Reindeer grazing laws had become tighter in recent years, penned in by new property lines drawn by governments that often saw the Sami way of life as temporary or inefficient. School policies had eroded the use of Sami languages, favoring state languages even in regions where Sami children were the majority. Missionary efforts had at times painted traditional beliefs as shameful, pressing for assimilation not only in religion, but in rhythm, encouraging settled life over seasonal movement, regulation over relationship. Elsa had lived all these pressures. She did not describe them as crises. Instead, she laid them out like weather, inescapable but navigable. What she offered the assembly was not a solution, but a compass. The conversations unfolded over several days. The tone remained measured. In this setting, even disagreement was quiet. People listened. They responded. They paused. And in the space between words, something steady began to form. A proposal was drafted to create a committee of Sami representatives who would study reindeer herding laws and recommend revisions, not from the outside, but from within. The idea was not revolutionary. It was reasonable, yet it carried weight. It asserted that Sami lives should be shaped with Sami hands. Elsa was not the only voice in the room, but she was often the one people turned to when discussion paused, when threads tangled. She rarely raised her voice. She rarely needed to. There was a particular moment, unrecorded in official notes, remembered only in fragments, when a young man from the north asked whether anything would truly change, whether this meeting, quiet as it was, would ripple beyond the walls of the church. Elsa did not offer a promise. She simply said, "We are not changing everything today, but today is what everything will remember." In the evenings, the delegates gathered in smaller groups, around fires, in borrowed homes, over warm drinks. They sang a few joiks, shared old stories, laughed at familiar tales told in new dialects. There was something grounding in the rhythm of it, reminders that beneath the policy and the paper, there was still the land. There were still the herds, still the lakes, still the children. Some had brought food from home, dried fish, cloudberry jam, bread packed in linen. They shared it easily, not because they had much, but because they had enough. When the final day arrived, there were no fanfares, no official photographs, no proclamations to the press. But there was agreement. The assembly had met, and it would meet again. For Elsa, this was not a conclusion, but a continuation. She knew that change in the north came as snow did, layer by layer, quietly, with wind and weather. What mattered was not the sudden storm, but the way the landscape shifted over time. She returned to her work with the same calm diligence she had always carried. Writing, listening, midwifing still when needed, organizing when possible, not for glory, but for coherence, for dignity, for continuity. Her health, in later years, began to fade. The tasks became more difficult. Travel required more strength than her body could spare. But the rhythm she had helped set did not slow. Others stepped forward. They carried her writings. They spoke in meetings she could no longer attend. They mentioned her name, not always with fanfare, but with familiarity, as one mentions a seamstress whose work still holds the fabric together. The first Sami assembly is now remembered as a milestone. February 6th, the day it opened, is recognized as Sami National Day across multiple countries. Schools sing joiks. Flags rise. Children learn Elsa's name. But the deeper legacy lies not in the celebration or the markers on a calendar. It lies in the quiet conviction that voices once considered peripheral could become central. That stories, when written with care, could become the architecture of recognition. That what began with a single pamphlet in a winter house beside a stream could echo across generations. Elsa's house is no longer standing. The kettle is gone. The desk with its folded pages has likely become firewood long ago. But the words remain. In meetings held today across Sápmi, in legal texts, in educational reform, and in quiet conversations beside campfires, the imprint of her thoughts still lingers, not as commandment, but as a gesture, as someone who said, gently but firmly, "We are still here, and we always were." The fire has burned low in the lava. Its embers, tucked neatly among charred birch logs, pulse with the warmth of the day's memory. Outside, the snow settles with no urgency. It moves like breath across the earth, slow and light, covering old footprints and sled tracks with soft forgiveness. Marit shifts in her sleep, her hand tucked beneath the curve of a folded hide. Her face is calm, mouth gently parted, brow relaxed. Beside her, your own bedroll holds the gentle heat of body and fire. You are not yet asleep. You are resting, eyes closed, but still aware, drifting somewhere between thought and sleep, where memory softens and lingers. The stories of Elsa have followed you into this hour, not as history, but as presence. Not loud, not insistent, but constant. You imagine her now, as she might have been, in a wool coat pulled snug at the shoulders, walking across hard-packed snow toward a village meeting house, her boots pressing into the crust with purpose, her breath steady, her eyes reading the sky before stepping inside. She would have passed homes much like yours, lattice and timber cabins, people bending over fires, children tugging at mittens, elders pouring hot water over dried herbs. And though she was often traveling for meetings or letters or speaking engagements, she never seemed to leave the rhythms of the land behind. She understood something elemental, that no speech, no pamphlet, no paper decree mattered unless it protected what was lived each day. The herder preparing lichen in the wind, the mother humming while stitching beadwork, the boy learning to read in one language, but thinking in another, the river slowly freezing, the bells around the reindeers' necks chiming in the dark. These were the moments that mattered. Elsa had no need to romanticize them. They were not symbols. They were simply life. Ordinary and necessary, worth keeping. She died in 1931, just a few days before the full bloom of spring. Her passing was quiet. It did not shake the capitals. It did not make the headlines of distant cities. But in the north, there was a stillness to that day. People paused. Some lit candles. Some wrote letters. Some stood by the rivers where they had once spoken to her, letting the water carry the silence. And then, as always, life continued, because that too was her legacy. Not to hold time still, but to move forward with memory intact. In the decades that followed, the questions she raised remained. Some changed shape. Some grew louder. But they were never forgotten. Sami schools began to reintroduce their own languages. Joiks that had once been forbidden in public were sung in classrooms, performed on stages. Indigenous land rights, slow to develop and often challenged, found new legal ground. Sami parliaments emerged in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, allowing for structured, indigenous-led governance. No single law transformed everything. No single assembly solved the tensions. But the current shifted, and through it all, Elsa's name returned. Not as a statue, not as a slogan, but as a reminder that quiet voices, when sustained, can become foundations. In places where people now gather to speak about reindeer migration, language preservation, or ancestral land, her words appear again, often quoted without ceremony. A line from a letter, a sentence from a meeting, the phrasing always calm, always plain, but always grounded in truth. Back inside the lava, the fire flutters slightly as a log shifts. A light wind brushes the outer wall. You pull the blanket higher over your chest and breathe deeply, letting your thoughts find their rhythm again. In your mind, you return to the morning, to the soft crunch of snow beneath your boots, to the reindeer calf that blinked in the pale light, to the cup of tea passed between you and Marit without a word. None of it seemed historic, and yet it belonged to something much older than memory. The Sami have always carried their past not in monuments, but in gesture, in fabric patterns and food, in the way a sled is packed, in how a child is taught to listen before speaking, in a lullaby, unrecorded but remembered. Elsa lived in that rhythm. She moved within it and shaped it without demanding that it change. She saw strength not in standing apart from tradition, but in returning to it with new eyes. You wonder briefly if she would recognize the world now. The electric hum of a nearby highway, the airplane trails across the Arctic sky, the satellite dishes pointing south. Perhaps she would. Perhaps she would tilt her head slightly, observe it all, and then return to the letter she was writing, focused again on the task at hand. And perhaps she would remind you, gently, that history is not made in the cities alone. It is made in the moments between firelight and frost, between language and silence, between one season and the next. The fire beside you is almost burned out now. Only a soft orange glow remains, pressed low into the ash. You are not cold. You are not restless. Your body is ready for sleep. But your mind, just before slipping into the dark, holds one last image. A woman in a long wool coat, walking through the snow. No procession, no spotlight, just the sound of her steps and the presence of her purpose. She does not look back. She walks forward, and in her wake, the land remembers. There are places in the north where the snow falls in a different way. Not heavier, not faster, but deeper somehow, as if the wind itself is remembering. One such place lies beneath a quiet ridge near the Visten Mountains. The birch trees there grow wide and low, twisted not by storms, but by time. Their bark curls in narrow scrolls, pale against the long dark of winter. The ground, when not covered in snow, is scattered with stones and lichen, and the remnants of things left behind. Long ago, no one knows how long, a drum rested there. Not a large drum, not one used for ceremony in great halls, or for calling crowds to gather. This drum was smaller, shaped like a shield, with a frame of curved wood held together by sinew and horn. Its face was stretched with untanned hide, painted in red and black with markings whose meanings have grown soft with age. Circles, crosses, track something that may have been the sun, something that might have been a lake, or perhaps neither. Perhaps something now lost to the tongue. It was found in the late years of the 20th century, buried shallow beneath a scatter of stone, shielded from decay by cold soil and moss. The archaeologists who uncovered it took careful notes. They recorded its weight, its pigment, the shape of the hammer tucked beside it. But what they could not recover was the air that once hung around it, the breath of the hands that held it, the quiet in the room where it once spoke. Because the drum was not only a tool, it was a world. Among the Sami, the Goavdes, or shaman drum, was more than music. It was a guide, a map, a memory. Its surface was a sky of signs, each symbol painted not for art, but for meaning. Its top half often held the world above. Spirits, ancestors, the eternal return of light. The middle marked the living, animals, weather, the camp. The bottom, shaded with care, belonged to what lay beneath. Illness, shadows, the unknown. But not all drums followed this design. Some held only what the owner needed. A reindeer trail, a dream, a sound remembered. The symbols changed from hand to hand, region to region. Some were crowded, others nearly bare. No two were the same. The one found in Visten had no known twin. No writings accompany it. No record of who carved its rim, or who last touched its skin. Yet a piece of red cloth was found nearby, folded and wrapped around a carved antler ring. A bundle left with care, a gesture of closure, or protection, or perhaps simply habit. What remains today are impressions. The smooth hollow in the hide where the hammer once struck, the faint residue of soot in one corner where it may have warmed beside a fire, and the silence that surrounds it now. It is not known who played the drum last, whether they were young or old, male or female, alone or watched. The churches of the North, during the 17th and 18th centuries, banned these drums. Many were burned. Some were taken, sent to museums, labeled and shelved far from their home. Others were hidden in walls or buried beneath fire pits, wrapped in reindeer hide or sewn into clothes. The Visten drum was one of those that disappeared quietly, and in its absence, the questions remained. In winter, the wind that moves across that ridge does not shout. It sighs. It passes gently through the branches, stirring the snow without lifting it. If you stand still there long enough, you might hear something else. The creak of a tree, the hush of falling lichen, or perhaps the echo of something imagined. Not a sound exactly, more like the memory of a rhythm. A single beat, then a pause, then another, and then nothing. In some of the old joiks, there are pauses like that, measured silences between tones. Not mistakes, not absences, but space. A place for breath, a place for listening. It is said that the Noiti, the Sami shaman, did not perform. They did not entertain. Their joiks and their drums were not spectacle. They were communication. With what or with whom, no one can now say with certainty. Some elders speak of journeys taken while seated, of visions shaped by the flicker of firelight and the slow movement of the hammer across the hide, of meanings revealed not in images, but in the way the pointer spun, its fall across a symbol, a crossing between worlds. But these stories grow softer each year. Not because they are untrue, but because they are rooted in rhythms that are no longer daily. They exist now in the folds of memory, in the notes of lullabies, in the curve of a carving that no longer has a name. In certain parts of northern Sweden, symbols similar to those found on drums have appeared in rock carvings. Spirals, hands, reindeer with double heads. But there's no key, no guide, only the stone and the weather, and the long shadows cast by winter light. Some researchers attempt to arrange these signs, to decipher, to catalog, to understand. But the people who once played the drums left little behind in writing. What they passed down was breath, tone, gesture. The drum was a language made of rhythm and pause, and like all languages, it faded when its speakers were silenced. Still, the drum in Visten was not destroyed. It was placed, intentionally, with care, which means that someone long ago made a choice to let it rest, to hide it, yes, but not to forget it. That is the part that lingers, a silence that was not absence, but reverence. In one Sami song, passed down between grandmothers and grandchildren, there is a single repeated line that holds no translation. It is sung gently, at dusk, while stirring a pot, or brushing snow from the edge of a sled. It is not a word. It is a sound, a tone that opens like a window and closes without comment. Some say it is the name of a mountain. Others say it is a path to dreaming. But no one claims to know, and no one corrects. The drum remains in a museum now, placed behind glass, labeled and numbered. People walk past it, pause, read the inscription. Some take photos. Some tilt their heads, searching for familiar shapes and symbols. But the glass does not reflect what the drum once felt. The weight of a palm, the crackle of a nearby fire, the way the snow bent sound just beyond the tent wall. That is where the mystery lives now. Not in the symbols themselves, but in their stillness. In the hush between what we know and what we can only carry. In the frost that coats the ridge each spring, long after the last hoofprint has faded, and in the pause that follows a joik before the next breath comes. In the still corners of old Sami storage chests, wrapped between hides and tucked behind carved spoons, there are links of cloth that no longer carry names, not tapestries, not banners, nothing grand, just narrow bands of woven wool, sometimes edged with beads or stitched with softened bone needles. Some are faded red, dyed from bark or lichen. Others are blue as deep lake water, darkened over time by smoke and skin. They smell faintly of pine and ash, of earth and time. They were never meant to be hung for display. They were worn, folded, wrapped, passed quietly from one hand to another. And what they meant, exactly, no one now says with certainty. In some bundles, the cloth is sewn into the edge of a gakti, the traditional tunic worn by Sami men and women. Not always visibly, sometimes hidden along a seam, a line of color that only appears when the wind catches the fold or when the light touches just the right edge. In others, the cloth is rolled into belts or tied in simple knots, placed beneath the layer of a jacket, warm against the chest. There are photographs, grainy, quiet images taken in the late 19th century. In them, Sami elders sit on wooden steps or stand beside sleds, faces calm, eyes turned slightly from the camera. Around their waists, if one looks closely, are patterned bands. The weave is tight, the designs precise. Yet none of the photographs include a note explaining what the bands are for. Some families say they were practical, meant to hold tools, a knife, a pouch of herbs, flint for fire. Others say they were symbolic, each pattern a story, each thread a line from a joik passed down and preserved in wool. There's one cloth, now held in a museum in Umeå, that is unusually long, almost twice the length of any other found nearby. Its ends are frayed from use, but near the center, 3 rows of red and white stitches still remain. No two people agree on what the pattern shows. Some see a path, others see antlers. Still others suggest it may represent the sky during the early spring migration. But the museum description simply reads, Sami woolen belt, origin unknown, likely ceremonial. And so it remains, in one winter story, told softly by older women during the long nights. There's mention of a girl who wove her dreams into a belt, not by spell, not by ritual, but by habit. Each night, she would sit near the fire, her hands moving in time with her thoughts. When something beautiful happened, a snowfall, a song, the quiet joy of seeing the herd return from a steep hill, she would choose a thread and mark it, a knot, a bead, a twist in the pattern. By the time the belt was finished, it could not be read by anyone else, but she did not need it to be. It was not made to be shared. It was made to be remembered. When she died, her belt was not buried. It was tied to a birch tree near the stream where she once bathed her hands each morning. For many years, the cloth remained there, through rain and sun, through frost and thaw, until one spring it was gone, taken by wind or time. No one looked for it. It had served its purpose. There are stories like this scattered through the Sami North. Not loud stories, not written in books, just soft pieces, told in kitchens and across sleds, offered between moments of work. They are not always about belts. Sometimes they speak of shawls stitched with secret names, or mittens that hold small stones sewn into their cuffs, or even hats whose tassels were once trimmed to mark grief, joy, or promise. But the meanings are always partial, held not explained. The cloth that remains today, tucked in drawers, folded in museums, worn still in quiet homes, does not speak. It does not name itself. Its patterns are rhythms without language. Its threads are soft from touch. Its colors, though faded, carry weight. In certain areas of Finnmark, women continue to weave these patterns by hand. Their fingers move quickly, almost without thought. They say little while they work. The yarn, they explain, must feel the room. It cannot be pulled too tight. It must breathe. They do not claim to understand the old meanings, only that they were taught to care, to measure each length, to keep the rhythm, to finish what was started. In one weaving house, a child once asked what the colors meant. Her grandmother answered, "They mean what they carry." The child nodded, and that was enough. There's a strange comfort in not knowing, to sit beside someone while they weave, to hear the click of bone against bone, the brush of wool across the lap, the faint creak of the loom. These are sounds that do not ask for interpretation. They are their own explanation. Sometimes, in spring, cloth fragments are found beneath old shelters, caught in the corners of collapsed goatees, or buried in sleds left to weather near the tree line. They are brought out gently, brushed clean, laid on wood to dry, and always the same question. Was this meant for warmth or for memory? No one answers. The cloth does not tell. There's a kind of beauty in that. Not absence, not secrecy, just quiet. The kind of quiet that lingers in forest snow, or in the gap between joik verses, or in the space between a question and the choice not to answer. Somewhere in the night, beneath the stars that turn slowly over Sapmi, there's a fire where someone is still weaving. She hums softly. Her eyes do not search the past for meaning. She simply listens to the thread. In certain clearings, where the spruce trees grow thin and the wind moves easily through the long grass, there are circles of stone that no longer belong to anyone. Not fire pits, though there may have been. Not fences, not altars, just stones, placed in rings. Some wider, some tight, some marked by soot, some clean as bone. They appear in places where no settlement has stood for generations, on ridges above old grazing routes, in meadows beside forgotten river bends, on islands only reachable in spring, when the ice softens and the boats can cross, and when the snow has melted just enough to show the lichen-covered edges. People pause and look. No one builds them now. No one says exactly what they were for. They are called sieti by some, though that word has stretched and bent with time. Others call them resting places, offering sites, hearth shadows. Some simply say, "It was used," and leave it there. What lingers in these circles is not absence, but quiet presence. In one clearing, beside a small lake with no name, there is a circle no wider than a blanket. The stones there are blackened at the base, as if touched by hundreds of small fires, though the trees nearby remain untouched. At its center, moss grows in a spiral. No path leads to it. No signs mark it, yet is always clean. No branches fall across it. No animal scat marks the edges. It remains tended, or respected. In spring, a curl of birch bark sometimes appears near the largest stone, folded in half, burned at one end. Not fresh, not old, just placed. Children who pass with herding families are told not to step inside the circle, not as a rule, not as a punishment, simply as a way of keeping rhythm. Let it rest. They are told. They do. And the smoke that once rose there has no name. It carried no signal. It bore no visible message, but it must have moved upward into the pines, into the sky, into the turning light. In some villages farther west, the elders tell of smoke sending, a practice that was never written, but always understood. A piece of bark, a twist of lichen, a pinch of dried berries or resin, placed into the flames, not to cook, not to warm, but to mark a thought. A wordless note sent up into the quiet. What it meant depended on the moment. A prayer, a parting, a memory returned, a greeting to something unseen. And the smoke never lingered. It moved upward with the wind and was gone. It did not promise anything. It did not return with answers. But sometimes, after it left, the room felt different. Or the forest grew still. Or the reindeer returned. Nothing certain. Just possible. There's one story, told low over winter meals, about a boy who followed the smoke. He had seen his grandmother burn a sprig of pine in the early hours, just as the frost was lifting from the roof poles. She said nothing. She stirred the pot. But the boy, curious, walked into the trees and followed the path where the smoke had drifted. He found no spirit, no vision, no shrine, but at the place where the smoke had touched the snow, he saw a single feather, black, with a white tip. He picked it up, carried it home, and said nothing. He kept the feather for years. When asked why, he simply replied, "It came from the smoke." And that was enough. No one repeated the story. It wasn't told as a lesson. It didn't become a tradition. It stayed quiet. Like the feather, it simply remained. Some scholars have tried to collect accounts of these sites. They visit in summer, when the ground is soft and the insects hum near the water's edge. They take photographs. They measure the radius of the stone rings. They ask careful questions. The answers are soft. Yes, my uncle left berries there once. My mother used to hum near it, but only in winter. We don't go there at dusk. Nothing firm, nothing to pin down. And when the scholars ask why, the answer is sometimes a smile, or a shrug, or silence, which may be the truest reply, because the smoke wasn't a message. It wasn't a ritual with rules. It was a gesture, a breath into the world, a way of noticing. Some of the old lavis had smoke flaps that opened just so, not wide, not narrow, shaped to let the breath of the fire rise cleanly into the sky. There was care in how they were tied, not to control the smoke, but to guide it. The Noedi, when they still worked openly, sometimes placed objects into the fire before sleeping, not to burn, but to scent the space. Resin, bark, dried herbs. The drum would be near, folded and hide. The pointer rested on top. The symbols, painted in thick lines, would fade slightly in the low light, and the smoke would carry what was needed. Not to gods, not to spirits, perhaps not to anyone, but somewhere, beyond the fabric, beyond the trees, beyond the names. In the early light, after the fire was cold, there might be ashes in the snow, or a scent that lingered on cloth, or nothing at all. Yet those who had seen the smoke remembered it, not what it meant, but how it moved, and that it had been, back in the present. The fire in your own lavu still carries a scent you cannot place, something between pine and resin. You stirred the logs only moments ago, but the smoke has already begun to slip away, curling past the roof flap and into the starlit dark. You watch it rise. You do not speak. There's nothing to ask. Only the warmth. Only the curl. Only the silence. There's a trail beyond the alder grove, where the branches grow low, and the wind often moves in a single direction. It does not appear on any map. It is not cleared or marked. Yet those who have walked this way before remember its shape. It begins in a hollow, soft with lichen. The moss there is thick and gray-green, undisturbed, as if no one has stepped there for many years. And perhaps no one has. Or perhaps the trail simply erases itself, slowly, like breath fading on glass. No one claims to have built this path. No one tends it. No stones line its edge. No markers hang from the trees. But on certain days, often in late winter, just before the melt, there's a way the light falls through the branches that makes the ground seem walked upon. Flattened, though there are no tracks. A way forward, though no one leads. The reindeer avoid it, not in fear but in respect. They shift their steps around the hollow, crossing in wide arcs, as if allowing the trail to remain untouched. Elders speak of it in the same tone they use for weather. Not dramatic, not mysterious, just real. Something that exists quietly beside everything else. They call it Gaku Volegaze, the far underpath. A phrase that is never written, only spoken. A phrase that holds its own pause. In one old memory, a herder once followed the trail. He had been searching for a stray calf, pacing the edges of the grazing ground, when he came upon the moss. It was undisturbed, perfect, but something in the wind urged him to step forward. He did not speak of what he found, only that, when he returned, he walked more slowly, and he never again tied a bell around his lead reindeer. Others have passed near the trail, children gathering berries, women weaving branches for a cooking frame, hunters returning at dusk. They speak of a feeling, not fear, not awe, just a quieting, as if the trees asked them to lower their voices, as if the snow underfoot had something to say. No one has seen footprints on that path, even after snowfall, even after sun, and in that silence, the story has grown not with detail, but with space. One version says the path was made by those who dreamed while awake. Another says it leads to a place where nothing ever ends, and nothing begins. A few believe it is the route the first herder took, before reindeer were ever tamed. That his steps, once laid, remain. But most simply let the story drift, because the path is not to be studied. It is only to be noticed, and then left. In spring, the alder trees bloom softly, their leaves open like slow hands. The trail beneath them disappears again, as it always does, buried in green. The moss thickens, the lichen stretches, the light becomes scattered, the silence deepens, and time passes not forward, but outward. In one tale, passed through 3 generations and never written, a woman with tired eyes once sat beside the trail and rested. She had not meant to find it. She was not searching for anything, but the curve of her journey had led her there. She sat, she breathed, and when she stood again, she left a single thread of red wool hanging from the lowest branch. The thread remained there for a season. Then it was gone. No one knows if the branch took it, or the wind, or time, but those who passed after said the tree looked different. Not bigger, not brighter, just more awake. There is no proof, only pause. And when night returns to the high ridges and the lavas glow with firelight, the path remains untouched. It does not move. It does not fade. It is there beneath the snow, beneath the moss, beneath the memory of footsteps. And perhaps that is enough. Not everything asks to be understood. Some things simply ask to be noticed once, and then allowed to rest. In a high-windowed house on the edge of Trondheim, where the curtains are pressed and the floorboards sigh only under permission, a gentleman sits before a desk carved from Baltic oak. The morning light filters through linen blinds, pale and patient, resting along the edges of a glass inkpot and the rim of a teacup gone cold. The fire in the tiled stove has been fed but not tended, burning in a tidy manner, more for civility than warmth. The man is not old, but his posture has aged into stillness. He is a district official, fogged by title, appointed not by inheritance, but by the subtle machinery of state merit and long dinner conversations. He wears a high collar that presses gently into his neck, and has done so for 20 years. His cuffs are folded precisely, not because anyone will notice, but because that is how the day begins. His breakfast was taken alone, as usual. Soft bread with butter from the coastal dairy. Smoked herring, served in a narrow dish with a silver fork that rarely touches the teeth. A boiled egg, trimmed neatly at the top, its shell removed with a practiced elegance that passes unnoticed. His servant, a man called Jens, moves like vapor through the room. He does not knock. He does not pause. He places a stack of letters beside the official's right hand and refills the teacup. The porcelain clinks, and Jens disappears again. The letters are written in long, slanted script, complaints, requests, invitations. One from the governor's office in Christiania, another from a local landowner requesting mediation in a matter involving reindeer paths and spring grazing. The official does not open them yet. Instead, he adjusts the placement of a small brass compass that sits upon the edge of the desk, a gift from a retired surveyor. It has never been used. Beyond the tall windows, the snow lies clean and untroubled. In the distance, a chimney releases a thread of smoke into the pale sky. Somewhere behind the stable, a boy feeds the horses. The bell of the Lutheran church across the square strikes once. Not loud, not urgent, just once. In this world, time does not chase. It announces itself and waits to be acknowledged. Later in the morning, there will be meetings. A delegation from the outer settlements. A conversation about tax boundaries. Perhaps even a quiet word about the recent Sami assembly, though that the official suspects will be treated as a matter of tone rather than substance. He has read the pamphlets. He has underlined certain phrases. Autonomy, recognition, ancestral land. They are words of shape, but not weight. Not yet. He folds the first letter. It is from a clergyman concerned about ritual drum remnants found near a frozen riverbank. The official raises one brow, not in surprise, but in habit. He sets the letter aside. The matter will be handled, delicately, of course. In the adjoining parlor, the embroidered chairs sit untouched. They are restuffed each year by a woman who travels down from Levanger, carrying wool packed tightly in waxed linen. She is always paid on time. She has never asked her name. The house is not large, but its rooms are high-ceilinged, designed for echo, for pause, the kind of space where voices must decide whether to speak. At midday, the official changes jackets, not out of need, but ritual. The afternoon coat is of finer wool. Its buttons carry the weight of understated rank. His boots are polished with a soft cloth made from imported cotton, and he takes care not to mark the floors. Lunch is taken with his cousin, a magistrate from the Southern District. They speak of mineral rights, of the delays in coastal mail service, of how the tea this year lacks something, though neither of them can say what. They do not speak of reindeer. They do not speak of drums. They do not speak of paths that do not appear on maps. There is no hostility in this silence, only arrangement. The elite do not reject the North. They administer it. They chart it. They reframe it with language and ordinance. They offer structure, and in return, the land offers them stories, smoothed, annotated, placed within the pages of their own logic. In the study, a map hangs upon the wall. It is hand-inked, pressed onto stretched linen. The rivers are named, the mountains measured, the Sami lands are labeled uncultivated. The irony, if felt, does not rise to the surface. On certain evenings, the official allows himself a small indulgence. He opens the drawer beneath the desk and removes a narrow tin of spice, cardamom, carried from the south by traders who do not linger. He adds a pinch to his tea. The scent fills the room with a sweetness that seems misplaced among ledgers and law books. He drinks slowly, eyes resting on the snow beyond the glass. Somewhere far from this house, a woman is weaving a red thread into the edge of a belt. A child hums a joik beneath a layer of pine branches. A drum sleeps beneath a layer of frozen soil. The official does not know these things, but he senses, perhaps, that something has been missed. Something soft, something without letters. In the evening, he signs a document regarding the expansion of fencing near the southern grazing range. He seals it with care. The wax hardens quickly in the winter air. He does not see the reindeer who will turn aside. He does not hear the woman who whispers to the wind. He does not feel the silence that widens just beyond the law's edge. But the room remains warm. The lamp burns low, and the compass sits quietly, still pointing nowhere. In the drawing room of the governor's winter residence, the windows are tall and deliberate. They face south, though the light that arrives in February does so in slants and fragments, brushing the velvet drapes without urgency. The brass latches have been polished by hand. The fabric is heavy enough to dampen sound, though no one in the household ever raises their voice. The floor beneath the window is covered with a rug imported from Copenhagen. The pattern is symmetrical, the colors faded in a way that suggests age rather than wear. A table sits to the right of the rug. It is narrow, designed not to be used, but to be admired for its thin legs and delicate marquetry. A silver tray rests upon it, bearing a glass pitcher of chilled water and 3 unmatched tumblers, each one hand-cut and slightly clouded. No one drinks from them. The pitcher is changed every morning. The governor himself is seated in a high-backed chair upholstered in deep red. The fabric creaks slightly when he shifts, though he rarely does. His coat is dark, his cuffs pressed. A watch chain dangles, just visibly at his side. He holds a small book of poetry, Swedish, bound in green, but his eyes do not move across the page. Instead, he gazes through the window. Beyond the glass, the town unfolds in layers. The spire of the Lutheran church rises, without intention. A schoolyard, now empty of children, holds snow in tidy drifts. A merchant's cart creaks slowly down the road, pulled by a horse bred for silence. Even the trees seem to pause in this view, bare branches lifted as if listening. The governor's thoughts move slowly as well, not sluggishly, but with refinement. He is not bored. He is not pressed for time. His day has been arranged in portions. From 9 to 10, he reviewed correspondence. From 10 to noon, he dictated revisions to a speech that will be given in April. At 12, He stood while a servant brushed his coat. He did not speak. Lunch was taken at the precise moment the grandfather clock in the hall struck once. Roast pheasant, delicately seasoned. Root vegetables, sliced evenly. A clove of preserved lemon to balance the oil. He dined alone. And now, in the long hour before his next appointment, he rests. Rest in this house is never idleness. It is a condition of governance. One must not rule in haste. One must think in quiet. And so, the governor allows himself this window. He notes the shape of the clouds, the speed of the light, the distant movements of those below. He has received letters lately, letters with unexpected names. A woman from the inland valleys, a midwife, if memory serves. Articulate, measured, writing not of illness, but of land, of people who do not appear on tax ledgers, of names that refuse simplification. Her pamphlet had arrived without warning, folded, unadorned, no crest, no seal. And yet, there was something in the rhythm of her writing that stayed with him. She wrote not as one requesting favor, but as one stating fact. There was no heat, only presence. He had read it twice. He had made no notes. He did not share it. It now rests beneath a stack of reports on lumber regulations. He lifts the book of poetry, though he does not open it. He simply holds it, letting the weight rest between his palms. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings, a small one, likely the chapel's evening signal. The sound arrives through the glass in softened tones, nearly part of the wind. He thinks, briefly, of the villages beyond the fjord, of the camps where people still travel by sled, of herders whose calendars are written in hooves and moss rather than ink and hour. He has seen their names in land disputes, often long and unfamiliar, sometimes crossed out and replaced. The clerks do their best. Accuracy is attempted, if not always achieved. The governor does not dislike the Sami. He considers them admirable in a certain way, enduring, self-contained, disciplined in their own rhythm, but they are difficult to place within the system. Their paths are not fixed. Their holdings are not surveyed. Their language resists transcription. It is not opposition exactly. It is inconvenience. He returns to the window. Snow begins to fall, light, almost polite. It dusts the sill, settles on the corners of the panes. He watches it, his expression unchanged. Elsewhere in the house, servants move without direction. A fire is stoked. Silver is polished. A coat is brushed, though it will not be worn until tomorrow. In the vestibule, a portrait hangs. It depicts the governor's grandfather, seated in a similar chair, holding a similar book. The expression is nearly identical. Time in this house does not move forward. It moves in circles. The meeting this evening will concern roads, a proposal to cut a new path across the inland plateau. Easier for trade, better access for administrators, more visibility for the state. There are concerns, of course, grazing routes, burial grounds, ritual crossings, but these are secondary. Infrastructure demands confidence, and confidence wears boots, not hide. The governor rises. His coat is already laid across the bench. His gloves rest beside it. A servant appears just as he reaches the door. There is no signal. The timing is simply understood. He steps outside. The snow catches on his shoulders. The air is crisp, edged with wood smoke and something older. Earth, perhaps, or the ghost of pine. He walks slowly. His boots leave marks that will be brushed away by morning. The street is quiet. Lights glow behind curtains. A dog barks once, then quiets. As he reaches the carriage, he pauses and looks once more toward the sky. There are no stars yet. Only clouds drifting. Only the weight of ritual moving forward again. The governor's sleigh glides smoothly over the packed winter road, its polished runners drawing thin lines through the snow. 2 lanterns hang at the front, their glass warm with golden light. The horse, quiet and trained, moves with the calm certainty of a life lived in harness. Inside the carriage, the air is scented with cedar oil and wool. A lap blanket lies neatly folded at the governor's side. Though he does not use it, he is reading a letter by lamplight. The handwriting is careful, the ink slightly smudged. The seal bears no official mark. It is another letter from the north, another voice from the herding districts. This one mentions a child removed from school for speaking Sami. The governor raises one brow, but does not react further. He folds the letter carefully, presses it flat, and places it into the small compartment beneath the seat. It will be addressed later, with proper tone. The sleigh turns slightly, following the outer edge of town. The road here passes near the forest. A modest camp lies just beyond the trees, nearly hidden from view. Smoke rises from one tent. It moves gently into the evening air. The governor notices, though he does not comment. The driver says nothing. The horse continues. Inside that camp, just a few hundred steps away, another fire burns. This one flickers from a shallow pit, surrounded by stones darkened with years of use. A kettle rests near the edge, suspended by a bent stick, the handle black with soot. The stew inside is simple: reindeer bone, dried roots, thin slices of mushroom. The scent is rich, smoky, grounding. Marit adds a pinch of salt from a pouch tied to her belt. She stirs slowly, not to cook faster, but to feel the motion. The firelight glows against her face. Her gloves are drying near the tent wall. A small piece of carved antler rests in her lap, half finished, shaped with slow care. Beside her, the others sit in silence. There is no need for talk now. The day has spoken already. The reindeer are fed. The sleds are secured. The wind is calmed. There is nothing left to do but wait for the warmth to settle in. One of the older men hums a low joik. His voice barely rises above the crackle of the fire. The melody is not precise. It wavers, stretches, repeats. It is not a performance. It is a kind of remembering. A child nearby plays with a strand of dyed wool, twisting it into loops, then releasing them. Her breath makes small clouds in the cold. She does not notice the sleigh on the road above. Back in the governor's carriage, the windows fog slightly. The warmth inside has begun to gather in corners. The glass holds the faint outlines of the forest. He glances toward the trees. His expression remains neutral, composed. He remembers, briefly, a conversation at a luncheon. A visiting scholar had mentioned Sami joiks, songs without words. He had said, "They name things that don't want to be named." The governor had smiled politely, then turned the discussion to rail lines. But now, in the quiet curve of the road, the thought returns. He adjusts his cuffs. The carriage turns again, now away from the forest, back toward the hall, back toward the polished doors and waiting papers. Behind him, the camp remains. The fire has burned lower. The stew is finished. The joik has ended. A second pot now boils, this time with water for cleaning. Marit lifts the kettle with a gloved hand, pouring it into a wooden bowl lined with dried grass. She does not know the governor has passed. She has not seen the letters. She has never stepped into the hall with velvet drapes. But she has heard of such men. Their names pass occasionally through the stories, quiet, distant, sometimes thoughtful, sometimes not. She does not dislike them. She simply does not expect them. There's a moment now, barely more than a breath, when both fires burn at once. One in a tiled stove beneath high ceilings. The other in a hollow ring of stone beneath an open sky. One shaped by ritual, measured in appointments. The other shaped by rhythm, measured in cold and time and instinct. The two lives do not meet, but they pass near each other. And for a moment, the same snow falls on both. The governor's sleigh arrives at the hall. The door is open before he speaks. He steps out, adjusts his coat, and enters. The servant closes the door behind him. In the camp, the hide flap is tied down. The last ember is stirred with a stick. The coals will be banked beneath ash, kept warm until morning. Inside, Marit lies beside her cousin, wrapped in layers of wool and silence. The night presses in, soft and slow. Somewhere above, The stars turn without comment, and between them, the man in his carved chair and the girl beneath stitched hide, there's no conversation. Only the flicker of two fires, burning for different reasons. One to maintain order, the other to keep breathing. In the evening room of the governor's house, the curtains are drawn early, though the snow outside still reflects a pale, lasting glow. The lamps are lit not to brighten, but to signal completion. The day has passed. The appointments have been observed. The schedule, printed on Chris stationery, is folded and placed into a drawer without comment. A servant enters with the final tray, biscuits arranged with geometrical care, a glass of cordial, and a letter from a colleague in Stockholm. The letter is left unopened. The cordial is stirred once with a silver spoon and set down untouched. The governor sits at his writing table. A candle burns beside him, its flame small but orderly. The room is quiet, save for the soft tick of the long case clock in the hallway. Each second measured, each minute accounted for, even if nothing happens within them. He lifts a pen, dips it in ink, and begins a note, polite, composed, the kind that will be filed by a secretary and later summarized in conversation. The note speaks of unity, of progress, of cultural attentiveness. The language is balanced, rounded, safe. He pauses halfway through the final sentence. Somewhere nearby, a door creaks gently. A draft stirs the flame. The pen hovers. For no particular reason, his eyes drift toward the window. The curtain billows, slightly where it had not been pulled fully closed. Through the narrow gap, he sees nothing. Just a slow movement of snow against the glass. But the air has changed. Not cold exactly, just less still. He waits, then places the pen down. Across the valley, far from the brick and brass of the town, the snow falls more freely. It lands softly on curved tent walls and on the furred backs of sleeping reindeer. It gathers on sleds, on carved poles, on the tops of boots left outside the lavu. Inside, Marit sleeps. Her breathing is steady, her hands folded beneath her chin. A small carved token rests near her head. The fire beside her has faded to a single line of ember, still warm beneath the ash. The night carries no news, no announcements, no revisions, but in the space between sleep and snow, something quiet settles. A thread, perhaps, or a name remembered, or the slight awareness that somewhere far off, someone else also paused. In the governor's study, the pen remains untouched. The ink begins to dry along the edge of the paper. He does not finish the sentence. Not tonight. Instead, he leans back, his eyes resting on the soft movement of the curtain. He does not know the joik that was sung near the fire. He has never tasted meat dried over birch smoke, or heard the sound of reindeer bells on a mountain pass. He has never stitched red thread into the hem of his coat, but something in the stillness feels less complete than it did before. He closes the inkwell with care, blows out the candle, and lets the room return to quiet. No reflection is written, no insight is declared, but the curtain continues to move, and the wind carries nothing in particular. Only the shape of breath, only the trace of presence, only the softness of two lives that never touched, but passed within hearing of each other. And in that near silence, the night continues, measured, distant, still. And so, the story returns to stillness. Its edges softened by time. Its voice is quiet now, but never fully gone. The people we met tonight, with their small routines and silent hopes, once walked under the same sky we see now. They stirred fires and stitched meaning into simple things. They listened to the wind and trusted the seasons to carry them forward. And though their names may fade, their presence lingers. In gestures we still understand. In paths we follow without knowing why. In the hush that sometimes falls over the world, just before sleep. Thank you for letting this story drift alongside you. If it brought you even a moment of peace, you're warmly invited to like, share, or subscribe. Only if it feels gentle and right for you. And if you're still awake, perhaps leave a quiet note in the comments. Share where you're listening from, or what part of the day or night it is for you. It's a tender thing to know we're resting together across different corners of the world. For now, let your breath slow. Let the weight of the day fall away. There's nothing else you need to do. Nowhere else you need to be. Rest well, dream gently, and come back tomorrow for another story, another soft hour, another shared silence.